Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the SBA Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or RRF webinar, the 8th in our Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19 webinar series. These webinars are being recorded and will be available for review on our website approximately 24 hours after the session. Today's webinar provides pre-launch updates on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund straight from our SBA NC District Office. The Small Business and Technology Development Center is an SBA partner and will be one of the partners providing technical assistance to RRF applicants. This presentation will also be repeated tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'm Bob Weston, Director of the SBTDC statewide COVID-19 Business Recovery and Resiliency Program, a CARES Act funded initiative expanding the SBTDC's capacity to assist small businesses in successfully navigating the COVID-19 crisis. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Byron Hicks, the State Director of the Small Business and Technology Development Center. Byron became the statewide director in January of 2021, and he's glad to have you all here. The SBTDC Recovery and Resiliency Program was started in April of 2020. We have 20 counselors posted throughout the state to serve in our regional centers to serve you if you need assistance. And you can access those counselors by going to sbtdc.org/ERFC. That'll be shown later in the program. We also have within that team a group that is specialized in the RRF program, and they will be helping with the Q&A for this session. I'd like to introduce Mike Ariola, the Acting District Director for the North Carolina District Office, who will introduce our program.
Great, and thank you so much, Bob, for hosting us. Thanks also to Catherine and the rest of the SBTDC team for joining us, and also to Eileen Joyce from the SBA District Office here in Charlotte for presenting today's program. I can't emphasize enough just how important the restaurant industry is to our communities and the broader economy as a whole. It's no doubt that restaurants and food trucks, bars, wineries, microbreweries of all kinds have been hit probably the hardest of all in the course of the last ongoing pandemic. When a restaurant is harmed, that means that its supply chain is harmed, because restaurants also gather supplies from all kinds of vendors. They also count food suppliers, including farmers of produce and livestock and that sort of thing, for their own supply chain. So there's a whole ecosystem that is affected whenever the restaurant industry and the food service industry as a whole are affected. So the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program offers some hope for just these folks so that we can keep restaurants in operation, our favorite places not only to dine and to have drink, but all sorts of other food service businesses as well. Before I turn it over to Eileen, I did want to announce some late breaking news, and that is we have just announced that the registration portal for Restaurant Revitalization Fund applicants will open this Friday at 9 o'clock. And then the portal will open for actual applications on Monday, beginning at 12. And what I'll do is, for everybody's benefit, I'll post a link to the press release detailing those two details, as well as how to start and prepare for registration and application. So I'll be sure to post that in the link. But for now, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Eileen Joyce of the SBA North Carolina District Office, who will go ahead and deliver today's program. Eileen?
Thank you, Mike. How are you all doing today? Thank you so much for joining us. We are pleased to bring this presentation to you. Bob, can folks see me?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if you have.
There you go.
All right. So can I have the next slide, please? This Restaurant Revitalization Fund was part of the American Rescue Plan Act, which enabled the SBA to offer a way for our restaurants, food trucks, caterers across the country to obtain some funds to get them through this COVID period of time. So we're excited that we have this ready to rock and roll very quickly. And we're going to cover today what you need to do in order to qualify and to be able to participate in this program. Next slide. Now, the big question is, who is eligible? Well, there's a lot of companies the types of businesses that are eligible, which is good news. And I encourage everyone to share the news with other restaurants, food trucks, food carts, caterers. A lot of caterers don't realize that they qualify for this program. Bars, saloons, lounges, and taverns, ice cream shops, coffee shops, and are all eligible to apply. Now, we do have a small caveat for certain types of businesses where part of their sales are for the public and part of their sales are for selling to other businesses. If you are a bakery where you have counter sales, at least 33% of your gross receipts need to be spent on sales to the public. If you are a bakery where all of your sales are spent sending your goods to like Publix or Harris Teeter, you would not be eligible for this program. So you must have at least 33% of your gross receipts to qualify for the RRF. That includes brew pubs, tasting rooms, microbreweries, wineries and distilleries, inns. Inns are also eligible, again, if 33% of their gross receipts is spent in the restaurant part of the inn. If you are a distillery, if you have 33% of your sales to the public, they're at your location, then you would be eligible for this program. So there's a lot of businesses who are eligible, and we're excited that we're able to offer such a great program to so many different types of restaurants. Next slide, please. Well, even though there are a lot of people who are eligible, there of course are some who are not going to be eligible. If you are a local government operated business or a state operated business, for example, you're the food court at the North Carolina Museum, no, you would not be eligible for this program. If you have more than 20 locations, then you would have to qualify under your different names and different industries to make sure that you're eligible. But as of March 13th, 2020, if you own together with any affiliated business more than 20 locations, you're not going to be eligible. A lot of folks have applied for the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant or plan to apply. You cannot have both an RRF and an SVOG. Pick one. You can't have both. You cannot be publicly traded. You cannot be permanently closed. Now, that means you have shut your business. You have no intention of opening it. You've started selling your equipment. Those are permanently closed businesses. If you've temporarily closed and you anticipate that you are going to reopen, then you are eligible to apply for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Nonprofits are not eligible. And when you complete your application, if the amount that you're eligible for is less than $1,000, SBA will not issue funds for less than $1,000. Okay, next slide. Now, we're going to go through different calculations on how you determine how much you're eligible for. But as a caveat, SBA is not going to provide more than $5 million per location. And again, the minimum award is going to be $1,000. Okay, next. This slide was put in here because of the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program. That program was set up very differently for many reasons, but you had to have a SAM registration, you had to have a DUNS number. Neither of those things are required for the restaurant fund. You can have an ITIN number as long as it is not expired and be eligible for this program. And everybody will be getting a copy of this PowerPoint. And so these are the links and where you can find information about the ITIN numbers and what happens if they're expired. So almost every type of corporation possibility is eligible for this program. So if you're a sole proprietor, if you're a partnership, you're self-employed, we encourage everybody to apply. Next. Now there's a lot of franchises that are restaurants. In fact, I think that's probably the #1 type of franchise that SBA loans are used for. In order for your franchise to be eligible for the restaurant fund, your franchise must be listed on SBA's franchise registry. And if you Google SBA franchise directory, it'll come right up on your screen, and it's in alphabetical order, and you can search and see whether or not your franchise is eligible. If by the rare chance that it is not eligible, there might be an opportunity for the franchisor to submit application to SBA to get it on the registry, but that's a lengthy process. So I can't speak to whether or not that would happen in time, but if you are a franchise, you do need to check and make sure that you are an approved franchise with SBA. Next. Now, unfortunately, bankruptcies do happen in times of trouble. And if you are under a reorganization, 11, 12, or 13, and you have an approved reorganization plan by the courts, you are eligible to apply for the RRF. If you are permanently closed, if you filed Chapter 7, liquidation bankruptcy, or you have filed for bankruptcy and you don't have an approved plan, you are not eligible for the RRF. Next. So how do the other SBA programs impact your ability to get the restaurant fund? Well, any funds that you received from PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, those will have to be deducted from your in your calculations to determine your fund amount. It's important that the EIN number that you use for the PPP is on the same application for the RRF. There's some other caveats with this too, including if you are currently applying for RRF, but you have an outstanding PPP application out there that hasn't been funded, you need to withdraw that PPP application. If you have multiple locations under one EIN for your first PPP, and under your second PPP, you use different EINs, you will need to list all your EINs on your RRF application. Okay, next. In the application, there's a list of things that you have to attest to. we're just making sure that we're checking all our boxes to make sure that you are a legitimate business and that you're validating that you are eligible for the program, among some other topics, like you are planning on continuing this business. Next. So what can you spend the money on? Well, just about any business expense going forward. Current business expenses are eligible. So payroll, utilities, you can make loan payments on your, if you got an economic injury disaster loan. You can't prepay and pay off a debt, but you can pay monthly servicing on debt. In terms of expanding your business, let's say you want to add, you buy the place next door and expand into that. You cannot use your funds for that purpose, but you can use funds to construct an outdoor seating. Outdoor eating has been encouraged during COVID. So if you want to construct outdoor seating, that is an eligible expense. Next. The funds have to be spent between, the funds need to be spent by March 11th, 2023. The funds can be spent on those expenses that incurred and will be incurred between February 15th of 2020 and March 11th of 2023. So you have plenty of time to spend the funds. If by some chance you don't spend all your money, you will need to return those leftover funds to the federal government. Okay, next. One of the important things to note here is that once you receive your funds, there will be follow-up paperwork. The SBA is going to expect a detailed expenditure report and certification from you that you have spent the funds appropriately, as outlined in our guidelines. You will provide self-reported unaudited data through 2023. And when you've spent all of your funds, then you will send the detailed final report. And those details on all the specifics on how this reporting is going to take place are not available yet, but they will be coming shortly. Next. Okay, so here's the important part. How do you calculate your funds? And we have 3 scenarios. So what's important to note is, when did you start your business? So if you were in business in 2018, that means you started your business before January 1, 2019. You will take your gross receipts from 2019, subtract the 2020 gross receipts, and then subtract your PPP loan amounts. And that is the value of your revitalization fund amount. Okay. Number 2, if you started your business in 2019, whether it was January 2019 or November of 2019, you would take the average monthly gross receipts for however long you were in business, multiply that by 12, then subtract 2020, and then subtract your PPP loan amounts. You can possibly use calculation number 3, which we're going to cover just next, but I'm going to repeat this twice, now and again. SBA is telling us that calculation 3 is going to take longer to process. So if you started your business in 2020, and even if you haven't even opened your business, but you have incurred eligible expenses, you are eligible to apply. You will take the eligible expenses from February 15th, 2020 and March 11th and subtract the 2020 and 2021 gross receipts and the PPP loan amounts. You can pick 2 or 3 if you started your business in 2019, but keep in mind, this calculation is going to take longer to process. Next. Well, here's some good news. There are some things that can be excluded from gross receipts. You don't want to include your PPP amounts because you're going to deduct them anyway. SBA Section 1112 payments. What that means is if you had an SBA loan to start your restaurant or your distillery, SBA paid loan payments for those borrowers for a couple of months during the pandemic. And those loan payments that we covered don't need to be included in your gross receipts. If you got an economic injury disaster loan, don't count that in your gross receipts, or the EIDL advance, or the targeted EIDL advance. You don't need to count anything, any grants that were received due to the CARES Act. If you were fortunate to find a local grant from, let's say, Wake County or the city of Charlotte that was specific to COVID-related funding, you don't need to count that in your gross receipts either. And then finally, the Randolph-Shepard Act financial relief, if that applies to you, you don't need to count that either. So that's good news. SBA, as Mike said earlier, and I'm going to repeat it again, the platform is going to open up on Monday. You can register this Friday, register your interest and get your application, get your identification in there and be ready to rock and roll. I strongly recommend that you spend the weekend reviewing everything that you need to put into the portal, and we're gonna cover that in a few minutes. Now, one of the cool things that SBA did, they reached out to the point of sale vendors like Square. A lot of the food carts use that. And what's nice about Square is they've got your documented receipts, and you can use that for your fund, proof of your receipts for your applying for your fund. We do have a telephone option. In fact, SBA will have several people who speak different languages, including Thai and Swahili. Lots of different languages will be available to people who would rather apply that way. And keep in mind, it's going to be a longer process and take longer to get your funds, but it is an option. Now this is a government program, and we do have a lot of required paperwork. One of the first things I think everyone should do is go to sba.gov/restaurants. And there's lots of good information there. There's even a section on other questions that could come up because everybody's situation is unique. Not everybody's, got an easy platform to do business. There might be a nuance that only applies to you, but we've got lots of questions out there that are answered for certain circumstances. So the Form 3172 is the actual application, and you can download that application. And I recommend that you do that and print it out so that you can check off everything that you need in order to apply. When you get into the portal, you want to have all these documents ready to upload. So that's very important. There's a IRS document called the 4506T. And what that does is confirm what you put on your application with what you actually sent to the IRS. If your if your restaurant files its own tax return, and what I mean by that is it's not attached to your 1040, you can get the 4506T just for the corporation of the restaurant. Okay. The documentation that you're going to need to prove your gross receipts, there's several on here that you can do. Obviously, IRS 1040, bank statements, your tax returns, the IRS 1120 or 1120S. So there's a lot of different things that you can choose to prove your gross receipts. So in order for you to apply with calculations 1 and 2, you must have the 3172, the 4506T. You need your tax returns for 2019. You want your last 3 months of bank statements, your most recent bank statements. So the last 3 months that you have. And then for 2020 gross receipts, what's preferred is that you've already filed your tax returns, because then we can validate that with the IRS. And if you don't have that, you can use a point of sale report. We would accept an internally prepared document or one by a CPA or a bookkeeper, but that will take a little longer to process, at least 14 days. So if you can do the first group, that would be the best. Okay, so calculation number 3 is a little bit more complicated. You're going to have the same items. And if you haven't prepared your 2020 tax return, at least submit the one that you're preparing to submit. Maybe not submitted yet, but you do need more documentation for this. Now, there is something called a CPA comfort lab. I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied. Let me take a little sip here. A CPA comfort letter is an official letter from a CPA. Can't be from just a bookkeeper or an accountant. It has to be a CPA who has looked at your books and will write a letter explaining that your documents are good to go, and that would be accepted. So there are some more things to take a look at here, and that's our resource partners are here to help with you on this too. And again, just take your time entering the information into the portal. Okay, next. Now, for the companies that they're just not completely a restaurant, but like a brew pub and a tap room where you have sales to the public and sales to other businesses, what do you need to add to this? Well, we need to see that your receipts for the public side of your business are at least 33% of your total receipts. So you will need to show documentation that, let's just say, for example, that your gross receipts in 2019 were $200,000. Well, you need to be able to distinguish what was sold to, Harris Teeter and what was sold to the public on that, and it needs to be 33% or more to the public. The same with an in. You just need to be able to distinguish the sale of food and beverage to the public versus the renting of rooms. Next. Now, we have a hotline that we've established just for this program to help with questions. And as I mentioned, we do have multiple languages available. Our district office is sba.gov/NC. And if you go there, you can find our staff listing and where we are located. We have staff in Asheville, Raleigh, and Wilmington, and our district office is in Charlotte. We work obviously very closely with the SBTDC, and their folks are ready, willing, and able to help you with your restaurant revitalization fund questions too. Next. I can't stress enough how important having the complete application done correctly. My fellow coworkers and I have been working all year long with folks who applied for the economic injury disaster loans and the paycheck protection programs, and in their rush to apply, they transposed numbers on their bank account. They entered the wrong form. They checked the wrong box, and the district office staff cannot go in and change those things. So it behooves you to take your time, be prepared, take your time, step back a minute, come back to it and double check it before you hit that button to send. As an agency, we've always encouraged that small businesses have a financial professional that can help them with their accounting, whether it's a CPA or a bookkeeper, making sure that everything is in the right order and your taxes are done correctly. It saves a whole lot of trouble in the long run. If you have a CPA, please solicit the help of your CPA or your bookkeeper to help you with this process and getting the paperwork all together. And as I mentioned, SBA employees cannot make any corrections or changes. We can't do anything once you've submitted your application. I don't even know if we'll be able to look at your application once it is submitted, like we could with PPP and EIDL. You'll have to call the hotline. And there are millions and millions of restaurants in the United States, and I don't know how many operators we're going to have. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure that your application goes in correctly. Okay. And again, the final comment on here is if you intend to apply for PPP, if you are in the middle of PPP, you're advised to complete your application in advance of the RRF, because you're going to have to deduct those funds from your application. Okay, next slide. Well, this is how SBA is going to roll this out. We have been working on a pilot program currently with some people to make sure that the program rolls out accurately and sufficiently. We had a big hiccup with SVOG, and we didn't want to repeat that. So we're hoping that this is going to go much smoother than that program. So for the first 21 days, SBA is going to accept applications from everybody, but a subgroup of everybody. We're going to focus on the applications from women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and socially and economically disadvantaged business owners. So on the application, if there's an opportunity for you to check off different boxes of your, are you a man or are you a woman, please do check those boxes and check them accurately. And all eligible applications will be processed after that, and we will keep this program open as long as we have money. In order for you to qualify as a woman-owned business or veteran-owned business, you must own 51% or more of the business. So if your business is a husband and wife team, and you're 50-50 on the business, that does not qualify as a woman-owned company. And nor can you change your business ownership structure now to make yourself eligible for the program. That is not acceptable. If you have several partners and you, let's say you have 3, you have a veteran, a woman, and a white male, that would qualify because you'd have 2/3 of the business owned by the priority groups. Okay. A lot of people ask what defines socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Socially disadvantaged individuals have are those that have been have suffered from ethnic prejudice or cultural bias. And those include individuals who are Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, and subcontinent Asian Americans. And then economically disadvantaged means that their ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired due to diminished credit and capital and credit opportunities. That is the standard definition that we've always had here at SBA, and it applies to this program too. Just to emphasize, reorganizing your entity to qualify for the priority group will result in an automatic disqualification. So they've actually prioritized how much money is going to be set up for different sized businesses. And this is a breakdown at this, how this has been originally set up. But that doesn't mean SBA can't change the reallocation of those funds. Okay. And I just want to now emphasize that registration is open on Friday. Applications will start on Monday. You want to go to sba.gov/restaurants and check out all the information there. You want to print out your application to get the ball rolling so you have everything that you need. And there's even another webinar this afternoon, a nationwide webinar today at 2:30 if you want to jump in on that one too. Somebody's always going to have another tidbit of information. And in fact, the Washington one might have some more current stuff that just broke today. I don't know. But I want to thank you all for coming in today. And now we're going to take some questions from you all.
Okay, thank you so much, Eileen. Yeah, we do have a number of questions here. The first one is, can we receive copies of the material or slides covered today? Bob, do you want to answer that one? Or
Yes,
Catherine?
the materials and slides will be posted on our SBTDC website. If you click on the banner at the top of the page, it's sbtdc.org. And then you click on the banner, it takes you to sbtdc.org/coronavirus. And down at the bottom of the page, you'll see webinars, and it'll within about 24 hours, we'll have the slides and notes from this webinar posted so that you can download them as well, the recording as well as the slides themselves.
Great, thank you, Bob. Next question is, how was the 28 billion calculated, and what happens if the funds run out in the first 21 days? It's probably good for SBA to answer. Yeah, the 28 billion was derived based on congressional legislation. So it's Congress that decided on the 28.6 billion in appropriations. In terms of what happens if the funds run out in the first 21 days, 28.6 is all that has been allocated. That's all that SBA has been given to work with. I will say, just as an editorial footnote, SBA employees like Eileen and myself are prohibited from lobbying members of Congress. However, if you wanted more money, you're free as voting citizens to go the legislative route. So I'm just saying to address your question.
Mike,
Next
can I jump
question
in there
is
real
what?
quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, so Restaurants Act is the kind of advocacy arm of the National Restaurant Association, and they have been doing a lot of lobbying on behalf of the restaurant industry. So if you do have some advocacy needs, I would recommend reaching out to them.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, next question is, what does business debt service mean? Is that a type of loan? And how about I call on Patricia for that?
I think that when we talk about business debt service, it's really any of those kinds of loans that we have. So what I think is appropriate is if we have an idle loan, it can be the monthly payment. It can be a credit card. I think it's more of an umbrella of the kind of debt that you have that you can use the money to pay it off. It is not a specific type.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, debt service just means your monthly loan payments. So you can use an RRF to pay for your monthly payments, monthly loan payments. You cannot use it to refinance any existing debt, nor prepay any like lease obligations or loans in full. You can pay the monthly loan payments though, but not a total refinancing. Next question is, do you include the PPP amount that was forgiven as well as the second round of PPP? Jonathan, do you want to take that one?
I would, although I'm myself am not clear on this answer. I believe that it is still whatever amount of PPP you received, whether or not it has been forgiven, still needs to be deducted from your gross receipts.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. In calculation 3, do you need to reduce the salary or payroll expenses by the pending ERC credit? Let me repeat that. In calculation 3, do you need to reduce the salary or payroll expenses by the pending ERC credit? And I'll just pose that one to all the counselors, if anybody wants to do a jump ball.
I haven't seen anything in the materials regarding how to account for the ERTC. So I'm not entirely sure. I know that would be affecting your payroll taxes, which would be part of your payroll expenses. I'm not really sure how to answer that one, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. I think if you do that, then it would be deducting it twice. So I would say not to. But I would definitely say get with a counselor in your local area to verify when you're filling out your application.
Okay, thank you. Next question, for the tax returns, will we need to upload the entire tax return or just specific pages? And I'll pose that to everyone. For the tax returns, will we need to upload the entire tax return or just specific pages?
I would say unless, go ahead, Patricia.
With our experience in all of the future PPP, whatever, I would recommend uploading all documentation. I would rather be err on that side than having a delay because something is missing.
And
Okay.
Mike, if I can just jump in here, what I'd like to remind all the people attending is that questions can be submitted through the Q&A. If you click on the bottom of the thing, there's a little Q&A button you can click on, and then that pops that up if you're not seeing it. And also for our panelists, our RRF team, if you click on the answer live, then that will mark it for Mike that you're prepared to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Next question is, can the SBA Form 3172 and IRS Form 4506T be completed ahead of time? Or is completing and initialing those forms part of the application process?
Electronically, they cannot be submitted early. However, you can get on the SBA website and look at those documents so that you are aware and prepared to fill out appropriately, and then obviously submit on Monday when the application goes live.
And my understanding is that they are basically baked into the application process. They aren't separate forms that need to be completed. As you go through the application process, the questions that you answer kind of at the front end will serve as filling out the 3172 and the 4506T.
Thanks. Yeah, and by the way, as a reminder, I had listed the homepage for the RRF, sba.gov/restaurants in the question and answer box. That is a really good website. It actually has a sample application that you can take a look at if you wanted to be familiar with the process. Also on that website is a link to the SBA's YouTube page, where they should be posting recordings of yesterday's and today's RRF application webinars. So I would check back maybe towards the end of the day today on our YouTube channel to see if that's been posted yet. Next question is also, if we don't have the SBA PPP loan numbers, how do we get them? Or is it okay to not enter them on the application? And that one I'll just go ahead and take. Yeah, you should, if it's requesting the SBA PPP loan numbers, you should enter them on the application. And if you need help getting that, call our office at 704-344-6563. And provided you can answer questions like your social and that sort of thing, we can release that information to you. And I'll post the number in just a second, again, in just a second. Next question, for people who have filed 2020 tax return extensions, what is the best approach?
I can take that one.
I think
Cheryl, go ahead.
I think the the ideal situation is to have your 2020 tax returns completed if possible. But if you don't and you're unable, we did talk about having, if you can provide your P&Ls for 2020, provide any documentation, and then, as Eileen mentioned, having your CPA attest to those numbers can take the place of your tax returns.
I would also just add, if you are using a point of sale company like Square or Clover and you run all of your sales through that point of sale company, you should have received a 1099-T, I think it is, from that point of sale company, which is essentially their official documentation of how much sales you processed through that point of sale system, which is also an acceptable document to submit.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Next question, this one's for Bob. Will the SBA accept Clover data for proof of receipts?
And there's two ways to do that. Clover is one of the point of sale systems that they've mentioned on our TA prep sessions with the SBA Office of Capital Access for this program. That will actually be one of the places where you can actually go and input your application through the point of sale system. And also, if you choose not to do it that way, you can actually go through the portal and you can actually use those receipts. You would have to upload them at that point. You'd have to upload the report from Clover as your documentation of your receipts. And that's one of the preferred methods on the portal too.
Thanks, Bob. Next question. I understand I can use calendar year versus fiscal year for calculation. I'm in the table 1 category, but the application doesn't seem to prompt for calendar year gross receipts. How do I indicate this? Also, the application on the website now says sample. Is this the finalized version of the 3172 to use? As far as I know, it is the finalized version of the 3172. But anybody want to take a stab at the first question where she asks, the application doesn't seem to prompt for calendar year gross receipts. How do I indicate this?
I believe the default is the calendar year, correct? That it's your 2019 calendar year gross receipts.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jonathan. Second part of this set of questions is, my fiscal year 2019 is August 2019 to July 2020. My CPA isn't finished with this return. It technically isn't due until May 17th, 21. Can I use my fiscal year 2018 return? That is August 2018 to 7/31/2019. Any thoughts on that one?
Again, I would recommend going off of the calendar year because that's what the application is asking for. So if you need to shift your financial statements to reflect that, I again would refer back to that 1099-T that your point of sale system would send to you, because that will be based on a calendar year. And again, utilizing your CPA to maybe prepare some of those financial statements that can be submitted with that comfort letter affirming that those numbers are accurate to the calendar year versus your fiscal year.
Thank you. And next question is, when it was mentioned, submit the last 3 months of bank statements, are you meaning January, February, March of 2021 or another time frame?
This was mentioned on another webinar that I sat in on, and it wasn't it wasn't answered completely, but it was my take the way Eileen mentioned it, that yes, January, February, March of this year, proving you have had activity at your business and that you are still in business.
Thank you. Next question. I bought the restaurant I had worked at for several years in July 2018. 2 months later, Hurricane Florence destroyed my entire business, and I spent September 18th, 2018 through April 22nd, 2019 renovating. By the program's definition of being in operation prior to January 1st, 2019, I am required to use calculation 1. Are there provisions or exceptions for people in situations like myself that don't have a full 2019 worth of sales to use in the calculation, which may allow for me to use calculation number 2?
Jump in on this one. We actually, as a group, talked about this and really don't have a clear answer. Our initial answer was there really is no way to do it, but I think it's the bigger question that maybe they could call a hotline if they have this kind of detail and get specific information.
Thank you. By the way, the hotline that Patricia was just mentioning, that's on the sba.gov/restaurants website that I shared with everybody. Next question, if we change POS systems during 2020, can we post the sales with our new vendor and then post the prior sales ourselves electronically? Or do we just handle both years electronically by ourselves?
Yeah, that's a very specific question. What I'd like to do is recommend that you contact, request an appointment with one of our resiliency counselors, and they can do that. The other option would be to call the hotline with a question with that level of specificity.
Yeah. And they can find your resiliency counselors at sbtdc.org, right?
That's right. sbtdc.org/ERFC, and they'll just let you fill out some brief information about your company and then just put RRF in the specific assistance requested field.
Okay, that was sbtdc.org/ did you say BRC?
ERFC.
ERF as in Frank C?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, a comment here, it's not a question. The application reads gross receipts as indicated on your tax return.
I think that was a follow-up to the fiscal year versus calendar year conversation. And I would, again, just if it is that kind of specific guidance that you're looking for, I would recommend getting somebody at the hotline who is going to have that more nuanced information available.
Thank you. Our tax return combines income for a motel and restaurant. Do we need to show just restaurant sales?
I
Our
can
team
answer
actually
that.
spoke on this. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl. Go ahead.
That's all right. Go
I
ahead,
was
James.
just saying we were just spoke on this yesterday, actually, and we were just saying it actually depends on your EIN, whether it's designated you as a motel or a restaurant. If it's a motel, then obviously you would follow that non-traditional food/drink service aspect, and you'd have to be able to prove the 33% threshold sales to the public. However, if your EIN designates you as a restaurant, then obviously you just use your gross receipts from the previous year, obviously falling into whatever calculation that you fall into.
And this question is also addressed pretty well in the application guide. If you go to page 19 and 20, it goes in there and talks about the different categories.
Thank you. This appears to be the last question. If I have more than one business banking account, do you want 3 months of each account?
This,
If they're correlated with separate EINs, then yes. But if it's all in one EIN, no. I mean, team, please feel free to, chime in, but I think that's the appropriate way to address that. If it's under one EIN, the same bank account, then no. But if it's dealing with separate EINs, then yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bob, that's it for all of the questions. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hey, that's great. And as a matter of fact, finishing up just right on time. I told Mike that I needed about a minute to just kind of wrap up and thank all our partners and that type of thing. I would remind you all that there is another webinar on this topic. It's basically a repeat of this same presentation tomorrow at 2. There are also, if you check the SBA website and our websites, there are a number of other opportunities. We know that restaurateurs, it's hard to break out for an hour even and get away during the day. So we're trying to offer it at multiple times through multiple partners. I would like to thank some special partners. These are SBA sponsors, SBA funded programs, the SBTDC, of course, and the Women's Business Centers. There's 4 of those in North Carolina, soon to be a 5th one, SCORE, and the Veteran Business Opportunity Centers, and they all have people that will be available for assistance, as well as the Office of Capital Access and their hotline and help, plus our district office, which you can contact with questions on the RRF. There's also 58 different community college small business centers across the state. They're not funded by the SBA, but they're good partners, and look forward to having them participate. The next webinar, not on the RRF, but if any of y'all also have venues, we do have a webinar this afternoon at 1 o'clock on the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant with updates and review of their application and portal, which just opened. A different group of our resiliency team will be doing that webinar. There's also this webinar in recording. If you go to sbtdc.org/coronavirus/webinars.html, then that'll take you straight to the page where the recording will be posted within about 24 hours. Or you can just go to sbtdc.org and click on the banner at the top of the page that says Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19. Scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the webinars button, and that'll be posted there. If you want to schedule a virtual appointment to talk about preparing for your application with an SBTDC resiliency counselor, go to the link at the bottom of the page. It's at www.sbtdc.org/ERFC, and our counselors are prepared to help you and connect you with the resiliency team on that. So we appreciate you attending today. We are here to support you. We appreciate all the support of the SBTDC office and a district office here in North Carolina, and the Capital Access Program that's helped us get up to speed on helping you. And we think this will be a great program. Don't wait, but don't rush. Get your application in, get it in accurately. And there is, like I said, there's only so much money in the pot. So get your application in as soon as possible. Do go through and prepare all of your documents and application ahead of time. All that information is available on the SBA website. So download it, fill it out, and have everything ready when you're going to apply so you can do it accurately, and reach out for help when you need it. That's the end of our webinar.